What's up, guys? And we are live. So today I'm quite excited to have a very special guest on, Elliott Hulse. He's one of the OGs of the YouTube fitness community, and he also does a lot more. So I'm quite excited to have him on, even though you might be thinking, well, what does fitness have to do with picking up chicks? I've been saying this for a while. I think they're indirectly related. I think Elliott has a lot of good insights to offer on this topic. So for the 0.1% of people who are watching this who are not familiar with who you are, can you maybe just give a quick background info about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, I'm a strongman, strength coach, CEO of Strength Camp, and father figure. I'm a father of four, and father figure to millions of men worldwide. How I got there? Well, I started out as a personal trainer like most guys, and this was back in 2004 when the internet was just like a baby. And I realized very quickly that if I was going to be able to get clients, I would use the internet. And so I was able to build my small personal training business out the back of my van that I called Strength Camp. We used to like drag tires and push cars and flip tires and drag and lift stones, like, you know, way before it was like a popular thing. It reminds you, it was like 2005, 2006. And as a means to get more men into my programs and athletes in my programs, I started filming the workouts, putting them on YouTube. And little did I know that a few years later, millions of people would be enjoying my videos. And my service, if you will, expanded as a result of the young men that followed me. They would ask me questions in terms of fitness. But then when somebody has your trust, they start asking you deeper questions about life, parents, girlfriends, school, things of that nature. So I'm still a strength coach, making men strong from inside out, outside in, all around. That's really what it's about, man.
Gotcha. Actually, a personal question I have, is there anything specific that made you gravitate more towards the strongman style of lifting rather than the bodybuilding? Like, you're more about strength and, like the that type of lifting. Like, what made you gravitate towards that?
Well, I got a gift and I got a curse. I have a gift of being a freaking brute. Like, when I played football, I was like the guy on the kickoff team that they would send down in order to break the wedge. Like, I'm a bonehead. I'm just a beast. I'm strong. I could throw shit around. I'm fast. I could jump high. So like, I just had an athletic propensity towards it. The first time I flipped a tire and pushed a truck, I was like, I was built for this. I was made for this. God built me for pushing trucks and lifting stones. But I also, so that's why I gravitated towards strongman. But of course, that came later. And most dudes, when they first, especially, back in 1994, when I first started lifting, it was just about bodybuilding magazines and shit like that. But it turns out that I like food too much. And these guys they eat some foods that or some diets that are very restrictive. And I never really wanted to do that. I just wanted to keep eating and lifting. So bodybuilding never really took for me. Also, strength is objective, where aesthetics is subjective. And so it's just a more fun competition for me if it's something objective, right? Like, either you lift it or you don't, versus the judges like the way my Christmas tree looked or my horseshoe looked. I'm like, that's not my style.
Yeah, if you think about it, it does sound a little funky. A bunch of men looking at other naked men and critiquing their bodies. It sounds like something It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, like something Mac would do. But okay, so let's start with this then. What are the biggest pieces of advice you would give to young guys who are new to the gym? Like, what do you think their biggest, I know there's a lot you can say on this and you have a whole channel on this. What are the biggest things you would say when it comes to getting strong and improving your physique, in your opinion?
Well, there's a couple of magical things that happen when you get strong and improve your physique. You also change your psyche and upgrade your physiology. And a big, I know your channel is a lot about like dating, pickup, and like how to talk to girls and how to have confidence and, what to say and stuff like that. Well, that's amazing because you have to have a strategy, but what you are speaks louder than what you do and what you say. who you are speaks volumes, right? And when you lift, you become more confident. You have more assertiveness about you. You walk taller. You talk firmer. You got a stronger handshake. Your entire psyche evolves. I like to say that the body is the ego, and I have a lot of reasons why I say that, but you can understand it. What you look like a lot of times, the way you carry yourself, your costume even will project who you are. It will project your energy. And so a guy that lifts is tough. A guy that don't lift is limp, right? And women could pick up on that right away. That's on the surface, but what's happening underneath as well, of course, your mind is upgrading. But what's happening underneath as well is your testosterone levels go up. Either you use it or you lose it. And we're having an epidemic of low T in our culture, especially for young men, guys in their 20s who have testosterone levels of like an 80-year-old man. And part of it is pollution, part of it is we're chemically castrated. So it's kind of out of our hands. But another part of it is we're not worthy of the almighty T, because we don't do anything, fiddling with your thumbs on your screen and shooting bad guys on video games is no reason for your man juice to go up.
Right. I mean, I think another big problem is food. I mean, the food nowadays isn't what food is supposed to be like. We did not eat fried shit. I think that would probably be one of the biggest problems. That's a whole different tangent. I think you and I could go on because we both agree on this topic. But let me ask you this. What do you think are the biggest mistakes being made by guys in the gym or even just propagated in the fitness community that you're like, you look at this and you're like, what the fuck? Because there's a lot of this that I see in the dating community, like a lot of really bad advice. What's the equivalent of that when it comes to fitness?
I see a lot of guys training for aesthetics first and athletics second. And like I said before, you're going to look like what you are. And if you lift to get strong, you'll look strong. And that's really what you're going for. First and foremost, as a foundation, is strength. So rather than, get into the gym and trying to, shape up, which you don't even have, but shape muscle and try to, again, lift for aesthetics first, you're kind of like trying to put icing on a cake that doesn't exist. You're putting a bow tie on and you don't have on a suit. You see what I'm saying? You don't have the tuxedo's not on, but you're putting on a bow tie. And so that's what a lot of guys do. They approach the gym that way. They're putting on a freaking bow tie. It's like, bro, you still don't even have on a tuxedo. So begin with basic barbell moves. You should learn how to, if you don't already know how to, squat, right? Put weight on your back, sit down and stand up with it, press, push something over your head. Real basic stuff is what I'm getting at. You got to start with the foundation, man.
Right. Yeah. So you're talking about basically guys that go to the complex isolation movements without ever mastering the key lifts, the compound lifts. So guys are doing like these exercise exercises, but they can't really squat like 150 pounds. Yeah. That is something I've seen as well. I mean, I'm definitely not as much of a big on being, having as much fitness knowledge as you, but for sure, I definitely see some key mistakes. Let me ask you this, actually, because I got to ask this. What do you think about TRT?
TRT makes sense to me in a world where we're bombarded with phytoestrogens and chemical disruptors, right? There are lots of strikes against us. And in order to even just get to normal, because that's really what it is, TRT is like just getting normal. In order to get normal, of course, you want to change your lifestyle. If you're eating a lot of junk food, you're not sleeping at night, you're underhydrated, you're not lifting. There are a lot of basic things that you can do to get your, body, your mind upgraded. But there comes a point, I'm 41 years old, so I can speak from age, but I'm not even talking about age. I see these guys that are like in their 20s and stuff, where they're doing all the right things, and their T levels is just in the tank, right. and they're suffering as a result, mentally, because low testosterone is associated with all kinds of like anxiety, depression. In fact, a lot of our symptoms and problems that are on the periphery, things that we deal with, the symptoms of, can be traced back to low man juice, low testosterone. There's a really good book. I'm not an expert in this. But there's a really good book called The Testosterone Optimization Bible by Campbell is the author.
Yeah, Jay Campbell. Yeah.
Jay Campbell.
Yeah.
Which would be a good idea for people to read. But there's also another one that I came across, and this is how I started to become more empathetic for the young men that I deal with and their low T issues, which was Optimize Under 35, I think, or Optimize Under 25, something like that. Optimize for young men, anyway. And this dude was reading this guy's story. I interviewed him one time too, and I recognized that he was anal. He was doing his best. He was trying everything that he could. He just could not get his T levels up. So he went on TRT. It's strange because, of course, the stigma is dropping tremendously right now. But the fact that there was a stigma tells you that we live in a gynocentric world, in a woman first world, because when it's praised and glorified for women to take birth control pills, alter their chemicals so that they could be promiscuous, when a man is optimizing what makes him a man, it's almost like there's something wrong with that. But I don't think there is, and that's my point.
Yeah, I agree. I've been doing TRT for 2 years. I've been extremely public about it. I don't see a big deal with it at all. I think you should do anything and everything that makes sense. You shouldn't look at things from a ideological perspective, but from a practical perspective. Okay, does doing TRT help me, or will it hurt me in my particular situation? Am I prone to cancer? Maybe I shouldn't do it then. Right. Am I pretty free from risk and my natural levels are low? Then let's inject up, as they say. So okay, let's change gears a little bit. I want to cover this. So another big thing that you're known for is saying that men are no longer alpha, that men are becoming pussies, which I very much agree with. I've talked about this on this channel multiple times. The reason a lot of guys are not getting laid, they're striking out with women, is because women look at them, they're like, damn, this guy's a pussy. Yeah. So in your opinion, what are some concrete things guys today in 2021 can do to become more masculine? Aside from, I'm sure the big one is lifting, but in addition to that.
It's an interesting thing because our ancestors, cross-culturally, in every traditional culture, understood that there needed to be a delineation, a mark, a line between the experience of boyhood and manhood. And so there were all kinds of elaborate initiation processes and rites of passages that the older men would, and the community as a whole, would engage in order to help a young man pass from the world of the mother, that's what they would call it, according to Robert Bly and Iron John and anthropologist Mircea Eliade, and some of the work of Robert Moore. There's a movement away from pleasure. There's a movement away from material comfort. There's a movement away from the world of mommy, the matrix, all pleasure, right? And there's a movement to the world of father. In the world of father, there's a two-step process. When they take, when they would take a young man out of his mommy's arms, turns 12, 13 years old, and you could tell that he's starting to become a man, but he's just still acting like a little biatch. So they would oftentimes it was a scary event because you have to break the ego in order to rebuild it. We need an ego breakdown at various stages in our life, particularly from that movement from boy to man. There needs to be a clean break. There needs a shattering of the baby boy ego. And so they usually come in and they would scare the boy. They put on big masks and then come out somewhere. Yeah. And the moms would play along. That was a cool thing from the work that I've read, is that the women would support this because they're like, well, yeah, the men need to come in now because this boy has to be something. Otherwise, he's going to be useless to the society, useless eater like most of us are today. And so the reason why I tell you this is because, well, first of all, there's nobody that does this. Doesn't happen anymore to any, in any systematic way. But there are also clues. There are clues that are left behind that will give us a path that we could potentially follow in order to do what they did for us, which was clean break from the mother. But then there's a second step, and the second step has two parts. There's austerity austerity and challenge, you have to be like, what they would do is, for example, my brother did a Native American sun dance, which is a rites of initiation in the Native American culture. And they took him up to the top of a cliff, had him sit on a stone, drew a circle around him, and he had to stay up there for 4 days, no food, no water. And he had to stay in this. So there's a challenge, there's austerity, there's penance, there's struggle, there's suffering. That is important because it all supports that ego breakdown. And then the second half of that, atonement with the Father, being instilled with some sense of meaning and some sense of purpose and some sense of mission in your life. So the clues that are left, I'll just go briefly and then we can continue. The clues that are left is, number one, you got to get away from pleasure seeking, mommy, baba, emotional, baby boy pleasure. You have to go on dopamine detoxes. You got to learn how to fast. Think about like literal austerities that you could instill on yourself, you could project onto yourself that are going to make your life better. Doing fasting is an amazing way to break the old ego down, right? Prolonged fasting. Doing scary things, dangerous things that your mommy wouldn't like, like just picking up and backpacking across the country or something like that. Something that breaks you away from the normal, everyday, mundane mommy pattern of the world. You got to do something that breaks you. That's why boys that go to boot camp, it's a great thing because they get ripped away from their mother. I watched this happen to my nephew. He went to the Marines. I was like, man, this kid, he's going to be useless if he stays around here with his mother. He went to the Marines, and like he has this whole sense, they broke him down, they ripped him apart, they shaved his head, and then they give him a whole new sense of meaning and purpose in his life. And so there's the dopamine detoxes, there's this austerity, there's a challenge, there's the penance, there's making yourself suffer, loving suffering, and then waiting. David Dieter talks a lot about this in The Way of Superior Men, being able to sit and allow the voice of inspiration, God, if you will, to speak into you about what value you bring to the world. What are you here for? What is your mission? And you can really dedicate yourself to that only if that first part happens. Otherwise, you're going to be weak.
Let's break this down to like concrete, practical things. So the first one is obviously that you kind of mentioned is challenging yourself, finding ways to challenge yourself and doing something that's severely outside your comfort zone. So for example, backpacking across the country, doing some kind of a challenge, doing some kind of fitness challenge, whatever. Yep. The second one is we got lifting. What would you say would be another one? Like you mentioned like things that kind of strip you down, like fasting. What else? Is there anything else that we're missing?
Religion. This is where purpose and meaning was instilled into the boy's life. So we do have a religion in our culture, whether whether we want to admit it or not. And we worship materialism. We worship money. We worship attention, likes and thumbs and followers. So when we worship that, we live for it. And that's a part of the problem that a lot of men are having right now, that they worship porn. They worship women. They worship comfort. They worship material. They worship these base things. These things are just, these things are dust. They're of the flesh. And so there has to, as a result, we're suffering from all kinds of depression, meaninglessness, black pill, depression, anxiety. Men are all fucked up because there's no sense of meaning. If there's no sense of meaning, then you really don't have a purpose. If there's no bigger meaning for your life, meaning where do you fit in the big scheme of things, right? If you remember when in that movie, The Lion King, Simba, he was lost in the wilderness, right? This is where a lot of men are. He was lost in the wilderness. He lost his father, and the old man, the old Rafiki, the old monkey, found him. The first thing he did with him after he told him, you got to remember who you are. That's what he said. You don't remember who you are. You don't know who you are. And so he took him up to the top of the mountain and he pointed up to the sky. And the first thing he saw in the sky, and this is the way it was depicted in the movie, is his father. And then his grandfather. And he says, for all the fathers, all the lions of all the prides, ultimately your ancestors, you are a part of this. You are carrying you're sitting in a throne now. What this does is it gives him but it gives us a sense of eternity. Wow, I'm not just a flesh suit walking around eating, shitting, and boning. I'm a soul. I'm a living soul that lives in eternity, and I'm linked to my father, my grandfather, father's fathers. And that is significant. I'm supposed to be here. This is a part of modernity. One of the lies of modernity is that you don't even belong here. You're a cancer on the planet, and it was better if your mother would have had an abortion. This is what the world has us believe in the type of things that they promote, right? We live in a death culture, right?
If my mom had an abortion, where would PWF be?
Right? That's how you know it's a lie. Right, that abortion is a good idea and that the planet is overpopulated. It's a fucking lie. Anyway, just so I'm ranting, but just to bring it full circle to answer your question, what's needed is a sense of religion, a relinking to God the Father and our ancestors.
So I agree with you about the part that purpose is important. It's hard to feel satisfied and fully content if you don't have a purpose. That same level of purpose without religion. Like you can't be an atheist or agnostic, whatever the fuck you are, someone who's also has a deeper meaning in life and on a purpose. Like I know religion gives a lot of people purpose, but I also find that you can have purpose without religion. What do you think about that?
You can absolutely be on purpose. You can have purpose and be an atheist, but the only problem is that when there's no afterlife, well then you're not held accountable to anything, right? Religion is helpful because it helps you remember that you're not just this flesh, and that you'll be held accountable for your decisions. If you're just a flesh suit, if you're just, I'm just a evolved monkey, right? And when I die, just go to the dust. Well, then nothing that you do really matters. It really doesn't matter. So you could just live as degenerately or as generously as you want. Of course, man makes himself a god, so you may go down in the annals of history like they teach us in school, and maybe you'll be like a George Washington or some shit like that. But ultimately, if your life is meaningless, if there's no there's no afterlife, then your life is pretty much 80 years or do whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that argument before. The counter argument I would give to that, and not to get into like a big debate about religion and whatnot, that's extremely off topic. The counter argument I would give is that let's say they legalize rape tomorrow, or they legalize murder tomorrow. Most of us still wouldn't go around and kill people and rape girls because even though there's no consequence, right? So people do things aside from the consequence. They do it for like ethical reasons. Like me personally, I'm pretty agnostic. Like I don't know what the fuck's going on. I don't really think about it, but I don't do fucked up shit. Like, just simply because that goes against my values and my ethics. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't make me like, if in the few times in my life where I have lied, that made me feel bad about myself. And I didn't like that feeling. And I didn't like having to live with the fact that I lied to someone that I'm close to. So for me, it's like I made the conscious decision to be honest and not lie, at least not to the people I'm close to. I don't mind an occasional white lie, but yeah, so that's the counter perspective. So, okay, so kind of change gears a little bit. One thing I want to get in is I was watching some of your live streams and podcasts yesterday, and one thing that you said that I haven't heard a lot of people say, but something I definitely agree with, is that circumcision is fucked up. And I agree with that because I was born in Russia. Like they don't really do that over there. So that's like an American thing. I remember moving to school in America. When you're in middle school, that's something that a lot of youths talk about. Obviously not something you talk about when you're in your mid-30s. Like you're not in the gym. You're like, yo, bro, are you circumcised? But like in middle school, that's a topic that came up a lot. And I always found it weird that kids made fun of me for not being circumcised. I'm like, dude, I have my whole dick. You got your dick cut off. What kind of retarded logic is this that you're making fun of me for having my whole dick? Yeah. And the argument that I think you made in the videos is that it's just basically a way of society's like already limiting man's image. Like you start off life by missing part of your manhood.
Yep.
You think this is something that's just like gonna get like one day we're just gonna realize, yo, what the fuck are we doing? Like this is just a barbaric ritual.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because if you say female genital mutilation, people freak out.
That's
They're
true.
like,
That's
oh,
true.
you can't. You're injuring girls in
That's
Africa.
true. Yeah.
But they have no problem cutting off part of their son's dicks here in the U.S. Right?
Yeah, that's
And
true.
it just shows you right again, gynocentrism. Women are
They
more
even say
valuable
that, like, look, we got a piece of his dick. They put it in the book.
Yeah, it's
Look,
crazy.
Grandma, look, we got his dick. Oh, sweet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy. It's strange. And there's a religious argument for it because if you know, it's only Israel and the U.S. that have that's like cutting off all their sons' dicks. They're not doing it that much in Europe. Obviously, you're in Russia, they're not doing it. A lot of countries in the Middle East, in Asia, they're not doing it. It's only U.S. and Israel. Just makes you wonder a little bit. But if you're a Christian, in the New Testament, it said that there's no reason. St. Paul says that you don't need to be circumcised. That's from the old way. That was so one of the arguments people will make for cutting off their son's dicks is because it's in the Bible, but it's not. It's not in the Bible. It's been transcended. We're not a part of that blood cult anymore, where they cut off, penises.
Yeah, I'm just trying to imagine Jesus 2,000 years ago. He's like thinking about what's important. He's like, all right, don't kill, don't fuck your neighbor's wife. Yeah, don't have your full dick. That should be on the list. He's like talking to Moses, like, yo, you think we should add this? Yeah, let's add this. Bam, on the list.
Right.
I think the one area where you and I might disagree would be so, and I don't tell me if this is something that you used to believe and you don't really believe this anymore. But I know that you said that in the past that, for example, you should either be married or be a monk, right? And that anything in between isn't really optimal. So can you explain that? Like, what do you mean by that?
Well, one of the issues, the big issue that we're dealing with right here is the lack of initiation in men. Remember, we spoke about how there needs to be a movement away from the world of the mother and a world away and a movement towards the father. What happens when a boy stays trapped in the world of mommy is that he spends his life pleasure seeking. And so, like I said before, our gods in our pleasure seeking world include porn, but then women become basically a masturbatory they become a meat, something to jerk off with, something to get that high that we first started getting when we started jerking off. So there's tons of things that we do that feed that pleasure beast, but one that becomes an obsession, that becomes a huge god in men's brains, where they cannot even get women out of their mind. They're obsessing over them either negatively or positively, but women are literally running around in their mind all the time because, number one, young men who masturbate get addicted to the feeling of that neurochemical explosion and fireworks in the brain. If you study your brain on porn, you'll discover that every ejaculation, every orgasm is similar to like a hit of heroin. And so first you start getting hooked on that, watching porn and jerking off. But the next thing you know, of course, you're watching porn, so you see the girls there. And so you see those girls there and you figure, well, I want to put my dick in one of those. Right. And so you start chasing women for that, but you're not chasing women for women. You're chasing them for that freaking high. You're chasing them for that imaginary sex that you've been watching on porn with. And so they start having all kinds of fucked up relationships to women and sex very early on in their life. And then it just continues. I think I didn't always think the way I think, but now I understand why fornication is a sin. Now I understand why fornication is a sin. It's not that sex is bad, it's that it destroys sexuality. It makes women sluts. Now they're on birth control pills and they're just wide open and willing, and their body counts are ridiculous. And I know you're into this area more than me. So
yeah, I do like my sluts. I do like a Sunday infusion of sluts.
All right.
But I see your point though, and I do agree with you that I think that it can become an addiction to like chasing the high of getting the girl. It becomes less about the sex and the experience, but more about just the validation of getting the win. And I will be honest, I went through that myself in around, my mid-20s. I think what can happen, though, and what should happen to guys in the game is that you get to a certain point where you can transcend that. Okay, I've had sex with several hundred girls. I don't need the validation of getting one more leg, right? Which is a point I got to, I would say, a few years ago. It's pretty gradual. Like, I don't need the validation. Like, to me, I would rather, like, if I have a choice between hanging out with my close friends and going on a new date with a chick, 5 years ago, I would have told my buddies, like, yo, sorry, but I can get laid tonight. Now I'll be like, I'll reschedule on the girl because my friends take priority, right? So I do think that hopefully this shift happens. I do think that for some guys in the community, the shift does not happen. I've seen it. Like, they're like have high lay counts and they're still prioritizing getting laid, which to me doesn't really make sense because it's like, okay, you've been there, done that. So hopefully, like, for you want to a point where you've kind of been there and you experienced it, and like it's still fun, it's still rewarding, but it doesn't drive your life. It's not the utmost priority. And I do think that porn can be definitely a big addiction. Like, a lot of guys, especially with the whole OnlyFans phenomenon, like, guys are now paying for like to talk to girls on OnlyFans, and that just becomes, I feel like, a vicious cycle. I definitely watched a lot of porn when I was growing up and couldn't get laid, but eventually you do want to get to a point where you really limit your porn intake. Like, if you're watching porn, and I think they did a study actually, they found that the average guy during quarantine jerks off 3 times a day, the average male. And
That's
to me,
average? That means there's some people
average,
more than that.
Yeah, dude, there's some people who are doing it 10 times a day. To me, that was nuts. I'm like, holy fucking shit. Like, that's a lot of porn you're watching. Yeah. That's a lot of jerking off that's going on.
Yeah. And it destroys us. It destroys our brain, destroys our physiology, destroys sexuality, destroys relationships. It's pretty bad. It's bad for you.
Yeah, I think that in extreme moderation, it's okay. But I think that when you start, I think a lot of guys tend to go down the rabbit hole and overdo it. And you know what happens? Like, you start watching porn, then you start watching crazier and crazier porn. And before you know it, you're watching some German guy in a dungeon, like fucking like, I don't even know, like, put a fire hose up a chick's ass, and like you don't even know what the fuck's happening, but you're jerking off to it anyway. Like, oh god, more hose.
Right.
So
yeah.
It can go down the rabbit hole. Let me ask you, do you mind if I ask you a few personal questions?
Sure.
So one of them is, you've been married for a while and you've had a successful marriage. You have several kids. What you say in past interviews, you found your high school sweetheart, right? Like, okay, I guess the question would be like, what made that work out? Like, at what point were you like, you know what, this is the girl that I want to settle down with?
The grace of God. I have no idea. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I didn't know what I was doing. I was a horny teenager and I was, addicted to girls, and she was giving it up. And so I got addicted to her, right? And she got addicted to me. And when I say the grace of God, I basically mean that there's things that when I look back in retrospect, I'm like, okay, now I see how that happened, but I was not conscious of what I was doing. That's why I don't have a strategy for that to happen. And I don't expect it to happen for most people. But I also can't take credit for it. And I see the beauty in it for my life. And it's so counterculture. That's a big part of the beauty in it, and the reason why I guess God wanted this to be my path, because in a world where being conservative is counterculture, doing things the way they were done 80 years ago is counterculture. There needs to be sort of a balance, bringing a balance back to, we've just become so degenerate. It's ridiculous. No relationships work. Families don't work. It doesn't work. People don't want to get married. When they get married, 60% break their marriage. And most people are cheating on their spouses anyway. So when you ask me that, I just have to be completely honest that I didn't know what I was doing. There are a few things that helped. She lived in a town that was next door, and we were just hooking up for the summer. And her mother flipped out and needed to go to a mental hospital. That should have been a red flag to me, but I was 14. Good thing she's not like her mother. Flipped out, went to a mental place, and her father lived a few blocks away from my house. So she moved towns. It was like it was just a weird turn of events that she ended up going to my high school, right after the summer we started dating. It was just supposed to be a summer thing. And so there's that. And then of course there are so many other things along the way that were serendipitous, that I couldn't create a blueprint if somebody wanted that. I don't even know if anybody wants that. But.
Well, let me rephrase the question. What do you think are the keys now? You've been married happily for a while. What do you think? Well, I assume happily, right? Because you're still together. What are the keys you would just say to maintaining a successful relationship? Because I do think that even though PWF is a channel about picking up girls, I do get a lot of people who write in and say, "Hey, can you make more content on relationships?" So I do definitely think that's something that a large percentage of the audience is interested in. So what would you say are the keys to happily staying together for an extended period of time?
Well, two things that come to mind right away. Number one is frame, and number two is authority. And so, and I'm just talking about from the men's perspective, right? Because it's multi-dimensional here. But two things that are usually lacking for a lot of men where their relationships aren't working is number one, they step into their woman's frame.
We're good. I just knocked over the thing while I was trying to switch legs, but we're good. Sorry, keep speaking.
A lot of guys, they step into their woman's frame. They step into a woman's frame. And I know I watch some of your videos and I see how, the conversation, you want to establish frame and the things that you're doing.
Right.
But dumb things like moving into a woman's house, right? Like you never move in with a woman. That was one thing that my dad told me. He said, do not move in with a woman. That's the most obvious expression of now I'm in your frame. So I think just straight from the beginning, you have to own the frame, meaning this is my life. And you get the pleasure of joining me. I think that's an important way. Even when I didn't know where I got that from, but when we started dating very early, I remember having this conversation with my wife. We're like 16 years old, and here I am like flexing. And I tell her, hey, look, this is the kind of life I want to live. It's going to be a wild roller coaster road. But this is just the way I want to live my life. And I'd like to have you come along with me. We were talking like this when I was 16. I'd love to have you along with me. I love you. It'd be great. But you have to be down for what I'm down for. I explained that to her. And of course, she's like, yes, anything, whatever you want. And that was established back when we were 16 years old. Of course, we could have changed over time, but it didn't. Our life has essentially followed the path that I carved, that I started blueprinting when I was 16 years old. It turned out even better than that. So meaning she was an addition to my life. I wasn't following her dreams. Don't follow your woman's dreams. You're the one that should have the dreams. She's the one that makes the babies. That's the way it's supposed to be. That's the natural order of things. Do not move. Like I hear these guys that like, oh, my girlfriend's in medical school in New Jersey. So I'm gonna go, I'm gonna leave my life. I'm gonna leave my path, and I'm gonna go move to New Jersey for my wife so I could support her on her medical journey. I'm like, that just sounds like a bad idea to me because you lose frame in so many different ways. Here's another one. Don't marry women that make more money than you. Because you lose the frame. Don't marry women that are older than you because there's an authority issue. I didn't even get to authority yet, but frame establishes authority. So it's kind of like a given. If you own the frame, well, then you're the authority. And so a woman has to be an addition to your life. You don't go chase or try to be a part of her life. That's got to be established. And then number two, when it comes to authority, look, every relationship, everything in the world, anything that's manifest physically that works has a hierarchy. There's a hierarchy of needs. There's hierarchies in nature all over the place. All organizations work when there's a hierarchy. And in this whole world where, egalitarianism reigns, because, humanism is our religion. So there's no value except, human value and being nice and equal. The people, heterosexual couples call themselves partners. And I think that's nice for homos because it's two guys. Sure, you're partners because there's no authority there. I don't know how that works. But when you're in a relationship with a woman, she's your wife, you're her head, you're the leader. That needs to be established because if there's no clear leadership role, if the buck doesn't stop somewhere, well, then men become effeminate because they don't take responsibility, and women become overly assertive, aggressive, hard, right, feminist. And so there has to be it has to be very established order that I am the authority in this relation. The buck stops here.
Yeah, I think the two things you said are actually key. The first one is that when you're getting into a relationship, it should be the woman is entering your life. You're not entering her life. But I see it the other way because a lot of guys don't have a lot going on. They meet an attractive girl and they're like falling into her life, right? And then those don't work. And I think the biggest example of this is when a couple gets married and they decide that the wife, for whatever reason, is going to be the one that works and the husband's going to stay home with the kids. 90% of those end in divorce because the wife loses respect for the guy. I've seen this happen to my friends, families and all that. Like the wife goes to work, husband stays at home. Not going to work, right? That's not a good dynamic. I think another one, like you see in sitcoms, and also you hear like the wife like rides the husband's ass, and she has his balls. She's the one dictating. And when I look at that shit, I'm like, what the fuck? Like, how the fuck did you fall into this position? Right. Or when I hear stories like, yeah, my wife has hasn't had sex with me in 60 days. I'm like, what? Like, how is that even possible? Like, I could not imagine ever being okay with that. Yeah, so I think a lot of guys just have like low standards and they're just willing to take whatever comes along. They also don't respect themselves, which is sad. But that goes back to not being an alpha male. Let me ask you this question. Do you think it is possible for a true alpha to be in a monogamous relationship indefinitely? Because you have books like Sperm Wars that make the argument that like 10,000 years ago, we would just fuck a bunch of cave women, right? We wouldn't stick with one cave woman. So what's kind of your perspective on this?
Well, you got to be a little bit of beta. Because maybe that's true. Maybe that's true. And that I should have a harem, right? But in order to, in this world, in this day and age and the way things are, in order to make best for my family, to take care of my children, I got children with this woman. I have to humble my alpha side a little bit. I have to put that behind me, and I have to be a little bit blue pill because otherwise it won't work. It won't work. You got to be a little blue pill because if you're all alpha, then you're gonna fuck up your family, right? Not even a relationship. If you have children, then this is the problem. The biggest problem we have as men in our culture is lack of fatherhood. Is the lack of masculinity in the homes, the lack of fathers. And so we just be contributing. If I was, being an alpha, I'd just be contributing to the big problem, which is now I'm going to have some fatherless children, fatherless sons, and they're going to grow up to be fully beta, So it's a balance. It's a tender, aggressive balance.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, you can't be 100% like alpha all the time. I do think that it is possible to control like your desires. Like you see a hot girl in the supermarket and your desires start having sex with her, but you don't actually come up and put your dick right inside of her. You might, say hi first, right? So it's like it is possible to control your desires. I do think you have to be at the right place at the right time in your life. You can't be like, if you're not ready, then it's not going to work. Let me ask you, completely change gears. This is something I've personally been curious about. What made you decide to shave your head? Were you finding, and this is something that's pretty close to me because I have some hair loss. Like, were you finding that you were having some hair loss, or was it completely unrelated to that?
Dandruff. I had real bad scalp psoriasis. I'm an idiot. I grew my hair real long, and then I put dreadlocks in it. And I don't know, fucking take care of hair dreadlocks. So because they stay wet and shit, it, like moisture got into my scalp, and all of a sudden I was having like really bad itching and dandruff. I screwed up my scalp.
Really?
Yeah. So the only way I could find to heal it was to shave it off and then to put coconut oil on it, because coconut oil.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I started shaving it and putting coconut oil on it, and then I healed my scalp. My scalp's healed now. I have no problems. And so at the same time I started shaving my head, I started growing my beard. I was like, let me just go for this different new look. And although I can still grow my hair back now, I have a full head of hair. I'm not have any hair loss. I like the way I look. I like this look. So I'm going with it.
Okay, got it. Okay, cool. Not the answer I was expecting. I thought you were going to say, yeah, man, I was losing a little bit of hair, so I went for the shaved head look. I did not expect dandruff, but okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
All right, let's take some questions because they are building up. And the most common thing we're getting is this interview is dope, so that's good to hear.
Cool.
All right, so let's see. I'm going to pick the good ones. Okay, so let's start with this one. Are we going to be able to watch this once done? Elliot dropping straight facts. Yes, we are. All the interviews go on the channel. They're going to be on there indefinitely. So, yes, to answer your question. Okay, so I want to find a good question. Okay, let's start with this. I'm 18 years old. My leg count is 5, and I've kissed over 20 girls. Is that below average for my age? I'm 18. What's the best advice you can give an 18-year-old? Much love, guys. You want to start with this one, Elliot?
Your leg count, you're 18, your leg count is 5, and you've kissed over 20 girls. I haven't slept with 5 girls in my life. So you beat me at 18, especially at 18. Maybe it was just exactly 5. So in my opinion, you're having a lot of sex, bro. And
he beats me by 5. I didn't lose my virginity until I was 19. So when I was 18,
right.
I would love for my leg count to be 5. My kiss count was probably 1, and it was, my mom on New Year's. And I'm kidding. And sort of. And my leg count was 0. So that's actually, I would say, it's pretty good. Yeah, it's definitely not below average for your age.
No, you're obsessing over it. You made women your god. Don't think about it too much. You're doing all right.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it depends on whether you're planning to go to college or not, and that's a whole different argument. But if you do go to college, like, you're going to get laid a lot in college. Like, it's so much easier in college than it is in high school. At least that was kind of my experience. I still wasn't really as easy as it is in college. I still wasn't really able to do much until my junior and senior year. But that's a story in of itself. So what advice would we give this young, upcoming young gentleman? I would say, obviously, me and you agree on this. Go to the gym, start working out. Yeah. But I would say also another big one is start developing marketable skills. So college degrees really don't mean much anymore, for better or for worse. You need skills that people want to pay money for. So a big one right now is coding. A big one is, like technical stuff in general. So just develop skills that people will pay you money for. So don't assume that if you go to a decent school and get good grades and you get a degree, that you're going to be successful in life. That was the case 30 years ago. It's definitely not the case anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you just nailed the 2 that women are looking for, besides looks, of course. Be able to protect. You're a strong guy. You got muscles. You look like a force to be reckoned with, and provide. Like, you're building your frame, you're making money, you're being marketable with your skills. So there's basic stuff, man. Go for it.
What supplements and vitamins do you take, Elliot? Do you take any supplements?
I use creatine. Creatine is like magic. It makes such a big difference. Creatine, whey protein. I use a lot of organ meats and glandulars. So like animal glands and organs.
I do the same thing. Actually, I eat a lot of organ meats.
Yeah,
they're good.
Yeah, I started eating liver chips. This guy, he slices and then dries liver.
Where do you get that? Because we both live in Florida, so maybe I could get it online.
He's online. It's called Carnivore Aurelius. If you see him on Instagram too, Carnivore Aurelius. It's amazing. So I kind of consider it a supplement because I was getting sick of eating liverwurst every day. I was like, oh man,
yeah, it gets annoying. Yeah.
Liver just gets disgusting after a while. I mean, I like it, but with these, it's just they're crispy, and you eat like half a bag, just a couple of them, and I get my A&D for the day.
All right, cool. I'm gonna actually check that out after this interview. I do need a way to get my liver in. Question, both of y'all, thoughts on NoFap and semen retention. So every time I do a live stream, this question comes up. Guys are fascinated by NoFap and semen retention. So we kind of touched on this, but what are your thoughts on this, Elliot?
I think, before we were talking about, monk or marriage, and, I got carried away talking about, men getting addicted to ejaculation and stuff like that. But, the flip side of that is this. One of the most important skills you could develop as a man is called self-control. Mm-hmm. Self-control is huge, and most men don't have self-control, especially when it comes to their sexuality, right? But when you start no-fapping, listen, I've been having sex since I haven't stopped having sex since I was 14 years old with my wife, right? So I never semen routine trained. And it's not like I was masturbating. I have a wife. But it wasn't until earlier this year that I started to learn the benefits of semen retention and started practicing carezza sex with my wife, which is where you don't ejaculate. And I started to recognize how critical that exercise of will against desire for pleasure is, and the self-control that's required. And I've learned a whole new skills that are associated with being able to, hey, this guy's talking to me, but rather than listening to him, because I listened to him my whole life, I get a boner and like, hey, wife, let's go. To saying, no, go to sleep. And then having to modulate my breathing and modulate the energy, the feeling in my body, and then to bring it back, bring the arousal level back down, is a form of mastery that I know some men have been practicing. So of course, there's all the physiological benefits, but I'm even talking about some of the psychological benefits. Walking around, here's another thing that I gained from this. Walking around with empty nuts, limp dick, right? Fully drained, makes you flaccid as a man. I started to recognize that. I'm like, I'm a flaccid man after busting my nut. I don't have the same vigor. I don't have the same vitality. I don't have the same energy. I don't have the same drive and the same motivation. But a man who's erect, who can just at the drop of a hat fill up, he carries himself that way. He's an erect man. He's a straight up man. He's a hard man. So you are like your dick. Literally and figuratively. Someone looks at you the wrong way in the elevator, you're just busting out. Fuck, don't look at me like that. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you to some extent. I personally don't fap. That's simply because I get laid consistently, so I don't need to. During the periods of my life when there's like maybe a week when I don't, I just take that time off from jerking off. But to me, my logic is a little bit different. The reason I do no fap is because I don't find jerking off nearly as enjoyable as having sex. I feel like it's almost like a cop-out, like do, versus I find having sex just so much more enjoyable. So I'd rather just save it for sex. Semen retention, yeah, to me the only thing is that like I feel like it can almost be torturous, like having sex with attractive women and not coming, because that's like the best part. So I think it comes down to the person. I don't know. I would need to see some like studies done on this to see if, like, actually, like, for example, they measure the testosterone level of a person who does semen retention, who doesn't, and see like if it actually goes up or not. But yeah, it's an interesting topic. I think that, as always, moderation is usually the way to go. All right, let's go to this. Yo, Elliot, book recommendations. So while we're on the topic of semen retention, Cupid's Broken Arrow is a book about having being in a sexual relationship but not busting your nut, learning how to retain. And it has a lot of scientific, mostly brain science, neuroscience, what happens in the brain when you're busting too many nuts. There's a lot of physiological stuff in there as well. So there's that. And then there's The Gentleman's Guide to Carezza Sex, which is a book about how to, be a man in a relationship where you're not busting nuts every day. And so those are two books that kind of like, piggyback off our last conversation. I think important books for every man to read include Iron John by Robert Bly. I think that's a good book. But then also Rollo Tomassi. You got to read Rational Male, So you got to read also Stephen Arniel's Hard Times, Strong Men, Great Strong Men, Jack Donovan, The Way of Men. These are all books about being a man, and I think it's important. I think we live in a world, and we live in a time where men are not getting the training we need. We're not, of course, the internet has made it possible for you guys to meet people, but we don't have the elders, we don't have the fathers, we don't have the grandfathers, and so you gotta go to books. You gotta go to books that talk about not just how to be a good man, but how to be good at being a man. And so those are a few of mine.
Have you ever read Total Recall by Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Read it.
Yes. You read it?
Total Recall. I thought it was a movie he was in, but
it's a movie and a book. So he did a movie, Total Recall, decades ago, and then he wrote the book. He called it Total Recall after the movie. I feel like that book would be right up your alley. That's one of my favorite books of all time.
I gotta get it. I didn't even know it existed. Arnold.
Dude, you got to get it. I feel like that would be right up your alley. I'm not going to give away too much stuff, but yeah, you're going to like that one.
Oh, good. I'm going to get it. Thanks.
Is there a specific reason why not dating a slightly older woman than if you're alpha?
Well, slightly older is a little different than, years older, 2 years older, even a year. I just think it has to do with frame once again. And women will often, they want power too. Women want power, right? And especially in this world, they've been taught that their value is in power. The whole victim mentality, social justice warrior world that we live in is all of, the power struggle. And so women will find any kind of lever that they can pull in order to at least sense in their own mind an assertion of power. It's like, well, I'm older than you. Well, there's a potential, not all, but there's a potential that there can be a disordered polarity there, and she'll think that she's like your mommy, right? I'm older than you, I can tell you what to do. But it depends.
That's a problem in of itself. If you're in a relationship with a girl feels like she's your mom, then you're into some kinky ass shit, yo. Yeah, I mean, I would say that, my perspective is that it's okay. As long as obviously she doesn't think she's your mommy. For me, it comes down to much more how the girl looks and how she takes care of herself. Because like I live in Miami, and like in Miami, we got 40-year-olds that look like they're 25. They're hot as fuck. And then we have 30-year-old girls or 25-year-old girls who don't take care of themselves. All they do is party and shit, and they don't look good. Like they look older than the 40-year-olds who do stem cells and go to the gym every day and take care of themselves. So for me, it's a lot more about like the girl's attractiveness and her personality and all that. But yeah, that's a whole other thing. All right, so let's take this question. Question to both. How do you think feminism will develop? That's an interesting question. On the next 20 years, and what will be the consequence if it continues like now? Find it hard to be dominant when the woman doesn't like polarity in Europe.
Well, it's establishing a large part of what it's meant to establish, was the destruction of the family. And part of the reason why the destruction of the family is unfolded is because they want to depopulate the planet. And so it will just continue to trend in this direction of less children, less families, more abortions, and more cat ladies.
Yeah, I think that it could go in one of two ways. I think it could keep going in the way it's going. And I think that this is what I always say when I like talk to a quote unquote feminist. If you ask 99% of guys, are they in favor of women getting paid the same amount for the same job, which, is most guys are, right? Like the vast majority of guys aren't arguing with that. The whole, women get paid 70 cents on a dollar. Well, that's for different jobs, right? So you can't pay someone. That's just like a talking point. That's not really true.
Right.
Yeah, so that's like a thing. You have to be like honest in these arguments. So if it keeps going, and I think the goal now, like women hate feminism. Like there's a lot of women that I talk to who don't like a lot of this feminism. Like, no, I don't believe in that. Like, I don't believe I should be shamed for wanting to stay home and find a husband who, I can raise kids with. I don't think I should be shamed for that. I don't think like whatever. So chicks on average don't really like feminism that much either. They say they're feminists, but once they start exploring the actual ideas of modern age feminism, they're like, well, I don't really agree with this. Just like most people don't really like political correctness and the whole SJW thing. Like, vast majority of people are like, yo, this is retarded, right? But we all have to pretend like we like it, right? So that's the narrative. So I think it can go in two different directions. It can keep going the way it's going, which is going to be unfortunate. But I actually think there's going to be pushback. I think there's already pushback starting to happen. Like people like, yo, this has gone too far. This cancel culture is retarded. Like you have a lot of celebrities who mainstream celebrities who are speaking out against cancel culture, which to me is kind of tied into like feminism a little bit. So I think that there could be a pushback. And like usually when one thing goes too far, this pendulum then swings in another direction. So that's what I truly think is going to happen. The one thing I will say, find it hard to be dominant when a woman doesn't like polarity in Europe. Every woman likes polarity. It doesn't matter where she lives, what she says, she likes polarity. And if she's part of the 0.01% who doesn't, then find a different woman. Because most women, they do like polarity. I've been to Europe. I've extensively traveled through Europe. If anything, women are more feminine in Europe than they are in America, where I live, like a lot more. So Yeah, they definitely like it over there. They like it everywhere.
Nice.
What's the longest you've gone without working out, and how long do you think the maximum someone could go without working out before it becomes detrimental?
I've never really went without working out, but I switched from lifting to yoga for about a year, and I got more injuries. I got more injuries after I started lifting and started doing yoga, so I'll never do that shit again. I don't think there's after 3 weeks you start getting weaker. You know what I'm saying, and your cardiovascular starts going down. I mean, I would never go longer than 3 weeks without doing something, but I don't think I get that long.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot easier once you already have muscle to then reacquire it or whatever the fuck the term is, like once it's rebuilt. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's like a hard number on this. I think it also probably depends on the person. The longest I've ever gone without working out, I mean, the first 24 years of my life before I got into weightlifting. But since then, I don't know. I don't take more than a week off. Like I usually don't take more than a few days off. I just find that if I go too long without working out, like I get more grumpy. I don't function as well. So for me, like working out kind of keeps me optimized, so as to speak, keeps me functioning good.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, this is an interesting question. What are your diet recommendations?
So I don't have recommendations. I have personal practices, and I know that I do best eating mostly meat, higher fat, lower carbs. I still need the carbs for lifting though. So, I'm experimental with like the vertical diet, Stam Efforting. I think he's pretty cool. And so, it's like strategically adding those carbs in, getting the micronutrients. I did carnivore for a while.
Me too, yeah.
I think it was cool. I think it was all right. I think at a certain point, it started to like have diminishing returns. And so I started adding back, some of my supplements and stuff. And so with the vertical diet, you're adding a little bit of vegetables and some dairy and stuff like that. So very basic advice I would give.
Would you say your diet is mostly paleo based?
Paleo's cool. I mean, it's something between carnivore and keto and paleo, something like that. That just works best for me.
All right. Yeah, I tried carnivore for 6 months and I tried again for 4 months. And yeah, I find that I had some beefs. First of all, it gets so annoying by month 3 to just eat meat. You start dreading eating because it's like, oh God, another ribeye. Like it's good at first, and then it just gets so fucking old. Just eating becomes miserable, which I don't think eating should be. Another issue is that for me personally, I'm an ectomorph. So whenever I go carnivore, I lose all my gains like pretty fast. I have to force feed myself to just barely maintain. As soon as I switch back from carnivore to paleo, I put on like 5 to 10 pounds. I look a lot better on paleo than I do on carnivore. People tell me that all the time. So yeah, tried it several times. Hasn't been ideal for me. For me, something like kind of like a crossover between paleo and keto has been like kind of ideal for me as well.
Yeah.
Big fan question. Elliot, what advice would you give your son to make sure he's picking the right woman before he marries her? Would you always recommend a prenup? Interesting question.
Well, I think this is a part of the value of having a great family, having a good relationship with your wife. My wife, she says to my daughters, make sure you find a man like your father. And I always say to my son, look at the qualities in your mother. This is why it works. This is the right kind of woman. So he has experience, they have experience seeing a well-ordered relationship in their home. I think that's a bit part of the problem in our culture right now is because there's no rightly ordered relationship in the home. Women don't know what to look for in their fathers because they hate their fathers or they don't know their fathers. And the same thing with young men. They don't know. They have disordered relationships to their moms. It's all weird and incestuous. And so that's the first thing that needs to be considered. And I would be straight up with him if he was, dating a woman that I thought was a bad idea. I would just have to tell him, I don't know if that, parents, we're not always going to be, we can't always be friendly, and need to be liked. And sometimes you just got to call it like it is. And I'm like, if he's making a bad decision or my daughter's making a bad decision, I got to tell
So she's a fatty.
bad decision. Yeah, that's a bad decision, buddy. I don't think she's going to work out for her. I wish you the best, but I wouldn't do that.
That's a lot more woman than your little dick can handle. Yeah. Interesting. What do you think about prenups? You think it's always best to go with a prenup? Or
Man, yeah, I do. It's an unfortunate case that there is, because instead of working on ourselves as men and women and in our relationships and making marriage work, because I think it's important, because families are what's needed so that we can have strong men in this world. We unfortunately are living in the feminist, litigious world. And so the cards are stacked against you. And I wouldn't get involved with a woman in a legal way. And if you're living with a woman, even in some states, they have like
common law marriage.
Yeah, common law marriage. I saw this one video about this guy in Canada who was dating a woman long distance in America. And they had been they've only met each other like maybe once a year for like 4 years. And they didn't even get married. And she was able to take him to court for some kind of money, some remuneration for breaking up with her.
It's crazy.
This is how crazy it is. So you're under legal, as long as you have a social security number, you're under legal obligation of the corporation of the United States of America. You don't get away from it, right? Unless, what are you gonna do? So I can't see why you would get involved and not at least lay out the law, lay out the details of how this is going to go. If it doesn't go, this is the way it has to be.
Yeah. I think what's interesting, what our mutual acquaintance Anthony Johnson says about the private marriage. I saw that video a week ago. I found that pretty interesting. So he was saying that when he got married, he did a private marriage. So basically you have all the benefits of getting married, but you keep the government out of it. So if I was to ever get married, I would probably do it like that. And that seems to make the most sense. Private marriage.
A private marriage?
Yeah, so it's like you have the ceremony, you have all that shit, and she can even change her last name to yours, but you don't have the contractual obligation.
You don't sign a marriage document, a marriage contract.
Yeah, something like that. He has a whole video on this, but like he was talking about how that's what he did, and so when he got divorced, that made things a lot easier.
That may be a good idea too. Look into that.
Yeah, for sure. Question: thoughts on toxic positivity and the new age self-help going around the world? That's a good question as well.
Yeah, it all goes right back to what I was talking about: addiction to pleasure. Toxic positivity is when the sweet gets so sweet it rocks your teeth, and that's what's happening with this whole aversion to suffering, whole aversion to austerity, challenge, anything that's hard, anything that hurts, anything that requires effort. People crack, they crumble, they cry, and then they want somebody to tell them a nice story. And so it is a byproduct of a world full of uninitiated men who are still addicted to their mommies and their mommy boy behavior. The new age self-help, new age religion essentially is interesting. It's multifaceted. And it's a monster that has many heads, but one of them for sure is to cause us to not look at reality and think that life is supposed to be all roses and perfume and feeling good and smelling good, when really a significant portion of evolution in life, for soul growth in life, is suffering and challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually telling my roommate this about a week ago. One really interesting thing I've observed is that, and tell me if you've noticed this too, is that anyone who is like too new agey, too positive, too lovey-lovey turns out to be the biggest fucking angriest motherfucker ever when push comes to shove. And I've just noticed this time and time again. The people who are like, yeah, I'm so, I just turn the other cheek and I'm like above that. Those are the nastiest motherfuckers. I've observed that time and time again. Like a lot of guys who follow me closely, the one recent incident I'm talking about, but that's a person who claims to be very grounded and positive, but yet he flipped his shit. So yeah, but that's a story for another time as well. Elliot, are you on TRT or completely natty now?
I started, I guess you could call it TRT. I started this year or like late last year. I think it was like November or December. But here's the thing. I was feeling pretty like low energy. I was feeling pretty shitty, but I wasn't living up to my greatest lifestyle. You know, COVID 2020, I started drinking wine. All of a sudden I'm drinking a bottle of wine, you know, every other night with my wife. I was overeating and I got, you know, so I was feeling pretty crappy. And even then I went and got a blood test and my testosterone levels were normal. And you know, that's kind of a weird thing because what's normal for me may not be what's normal for, you know, the standard guy.
Right.
But as a result of, you know, all my tests coming back normal for a 41-year-old dude, the clinic that I was using, they were like, oh, you know, we're not going to prescribe it for you. So you know, but we'll put you on HCG. And so I'm on HCG. I'm on HCG, and as a result, apparently HCG, I found this out the hard way. Apparently HCG will boost the crap out of your estradiol as well. And so they put me on an AI with it, and that's really all I'm taking. And if you HCG basically stimulates your body to produce more of its own testosterone. And so
one thing I will say, and I'm sure you probably already know this, you got to be careful with the AIs because they can lead to all kinds of bone problems and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, AIs can be more dangerous than the testosterone. Well, actually, testosterone is not really dangerous, but AIs can be for sure. So I would say, forget.
I don't know how much longer I'll continue with it because I'm not sure it's. I don't know if it's really helping me. So I'll give it another month or two, but I might come back off it.
Gotcha. Interesting question, Elliot. Who first introduced you to game or pickup? Would you say RSD Tyler was one of them?
He was one of them in an indirect way. I don't know if you guys remember Jason Capital. I know who Jason Capital is, but right now he does mostly like he's teaching guys how to like build their business and make money and stuff. But he started out as a pickup guy, and he met me. We met each other back in like 2007 when he was still in college. He was a little basketball player, and he used to come to my gym, and he would come and work out at my gym, and he would learn about internet marketing by like looking over my shoulder because I was selling ebooks and stuff like that at the time. And he took that and he just blew up in selling basketball ebooks. But then he got tired of that and he started doing dating, like pickup. And I never heard of it at the time. I was like, what is this? What are you doing, dude? And he's like, there's a whole industry out there of guys that need to be told how to deal with women. I was like, wow, because I had been married the whole time. I don't know what that was going on out there. And so he introduced me to RSD Tyler. He was like, check this guy out. Look what he's doing. I want to do this. And he used RSD Tyler as his inspiration, and he went and built a whole business around pickup.
Yeah, RSD Tyler's an interesting character. Yeah, let's take one or two more questions because we've been going for over an hour. Let's do end it off on
my steak.
Let's end it off on a good one. Elliot, what practices you recommend for men to manage anger or bad emotions in general and stay grounded?
First of all, you have to recognize that you are not your emotions. Do not believe your emotions. No matter what emotion arises in you, you have to objectify it. You have to see it as separate from you. Otherwise, you're ruled by it. And so you just start doing that by not necessarily questioning, but objectifying your emotions. Just notice, hey, there's anger there. Don't say I'm angry, I'm depressed. Just notice, there's some anger in my body. And even it's so easy to objectify it when you actually go to where your body is experiencing it, right? Like you might say, I'm angry, but you're like, no, your jaw is just clenched, and so is your fist. Your shoulders are up. And so you recognize that the physical manifestation of this emotion, which is energy moving in the body, is, oh, my shoulders are, oh man, my jaw. And you start objectifying it and not necessarily calling, because when you call it an emotion and you identify with it, what you do is you draw in all the memory associated with moments that you were betrayed or moments that, that made you angry. And then it starts compounding, and then you get into this freaking loop. So you just go to your body and you objectify it. You let it be what it is. And as a man, it is our responsibility to be stoic, to be still, to be objective, right? In a way that women aren't naturally. We aren't naturally either, but because we are tougher, we've got more of an ability to do that. And so it's our responsibility to do it.
Yeah, we can't be too emotionally reactive. All right, bro. This was a dope live stream. I think it's interesting because you and I come from different schools of thought, and we have a lot of ideas that we overlap on and some we disagree on, which is interesting always to flesh these things out and discuss. Yeah. Thank you so much for doing this, man. I really appreciate it. How can guys support your work? How can guys follow you, learn more about you? Where should they go?
Just follow me on Instagram at ElliotHulse.com. And you can also, I've been posting on I have 2 YouTube channels. One is Strength Camp. I haven't posted on there in over a year, but I'm going to come back pretty soon because I'm moving to a ranch and I'm going to do some vlogs. But you can follow me on my Elliot Hulse channel, where I've just been uploading some of the coaching calls that I have with my students, and a lot of the value. There's a lot of value in watching those if you're interested in things I talk about.
Cool. Yeah, we'll put all the, if you guys are watching this on repeat, we're going to put all links in the description, so check that out. Awesome, bro. Great live stream. Thanks again. Much appreciated.
Yeah, you got it,
guys. We got Anthony Johnson coming on next week. It's going to be definitely a very interesting live stream as well. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. We also got a video coming out tomorrow. That's going to be quite exciting as well. And also, we just released a video. Well, not released, but we just finished a video where we're going to analyze my voice. And you guys have always been asking in the comments, why does your voice sound deeper? What do you do to change your voice? So I'm fully broke that down. It's definitely going to be one of my more interesting videos. So check that out as well. All right. Thank you, guys. Until next time.